Hello, my name is Brittany Keese, and today I'm going to be talking about principles for reducing extraneous cognitive processes in multimedia learning. So, some key principles that I'm going to talk about today are redundancy principle, signaling principle, and temporal continuity principle. So, some things to keep in mind when we're talking about extraneous cognitive load is that we have multiple channels working within our working memory, and we have a limited capacity as well as an active processing range. So we need to be mindful of those things when we're creating lessons. So that's what we're going to be talking about today and focusing in on. So for example, if we have a visual and a verbal to process at the same time, that can create a cognitive strain. And today we're focusing on how to reduce those cognitive overload in our instruction. So first, I want to begin by talking about the redundancy principle. So this can be found in several formats. We have picture text, equipment, written and spoken text, and a second language. So picture text, which we're going to see most often, refers to when we have a picture on screen with text and they could be interpreted separately from each other. So I could just have the picture and it's got written word on it, or I'm going to speak it, and I don't need to have that other wording there. It's just creating interference because now I've got two things that they need to process at the same time. The other one that's very common is going to be written and spoken. So again, we have written text on the board that we want them to process, but we're also speaking written text that's similar but might not be exactly the same. So it's creating that interference. They've got two channels going at the same time that are starting to work against each other and interfere with their cognitive functions, at which we don't want to happen. We'd rather have the essential information displayed and rather get across those points. So rather than repeating and being redundant about stuff that's already on display, we want to present something in multiple ways. So rather than just speaking and having written, we could have a relevant picture or something that pertains to our lesson, and then we can speak verbally what we want our students to have come across. Or if we just want written, we can put written up there and not speak anything verbally and just have them process in one channel. So those are two ways that we might consider reducing that extraneous cognitive load for them. So a good example of redundancy principle is if I were teaching how to change a mixed number into an improper fraction, this might be the slide that I present. So when we're changing a mixed number to an improper fraction, we will multiply the denominator by the whole number, which will give us 10, and then we're going to add 10 to our numerator, which is 3. So 10 plus 3 is going to give me 13. That's going to be my new numerator for my improper fraction. And then for my denominator, I'm going to keep it the same. So my new number should be 13 over 5. So you can see how I had words up there and I also had a visual that's conflicting with the words that I'm speaking. So that's creating an interference in your channels of processing verbal and written and a visual as a whole. So you don't want to do that to your students. So something that might be better might be this. So rather than having words on here, I'm going to explain the directions. So when I'm changing a mixed number to an improper fraction, I'm going to multiply the denominator 5 times the whole number 2 to give me 10. I'm then going to add 10 to my numerator, which is 3, and I'm going to that's going to make 13 for my new improper fraction numerator. So 13, and then I'm going to keep the denominator the same that it was in the mixed number, which is 5. So my new improper fraction is now 13 over 5. See how that was much better? Now I have just a picture or just a visual. I don't have any words that they really need to process on the page, and then I'm speaking the instructions. So rather than having to process the written and my verbal, they're just processing one input. Signaling is the next principle I want to discuss, and it's really just adding a cue. It's directing a learner to the essential information so you're not causing that extraneous load processing. So the learner is directed to the essential information by way of an arrow or something directing their attention. So for example, if I were teaching how to label the parts of a mixed number, this is what I might show them. So you can see that my base is directed with an arrow. I have my denominator and my numerator. That wasn't difficult to process those parts, but if I had nothing on the screen other than that number and I'm talking about it, that's going to create some problems with their cognitive load because now they're trying to figure out what number I'm talking about rather than being directed directly to the number that I'm referring to for that vocabulary. The third and final principle that I'm going to talk about is temporal contiguity. So this is supposed to be creating less of a strain on the working memory because they don't have to hold animations or hold text while trying to process something else or process new information. So we're trying to make them have less of an extraneous load by holding that information in the working memory. So we don't want them to have to hold that information in the working memory. So for example, giving an example for them to do on one slide followed by directions on how they should solve it on another. So let's see how that would look. On this slide, I show what I would be speaking verbally while showing the picture that I would have on display. So I would be speaking them verbally. That would be a good way to reduce that temporal contiguity because now we're not working against each other. So let me give you an example of something that would not work out. In this one, I'm giving the directions. So I would be saying, okay, class, we're going to learn how to change this mixed number into an improper fraction. So let's look at those. Let's look at those steps for how to change the mixed number into an improper fraction. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to multiply the denominator times the whole number, and then that product is going to be added to our numerator, which is going to give us our new numerator for our mixed number. And then we're going to keep the denominator the same. So you can see that that was kind of hard because now we have to go back into our working memory and think about what mixed number was just displayed previously. So instead of doing that, we might consider saying the directions first on how to do it, letting them process the way to solve the mixed number, and then we'll give them an example. Or we could give the example that they'll be doing, so we could have 2 3/5, and give the directions at the same time. That way we're reducing that extraneous load. We're not making them hold on to the fraction or the directions in their working memory. So let's take a look at what that would look like. So when we're changing a mixed number to an improper fraction, we're going to multiply the denominator of the mixed number, 5, times the whole number, 2, which is going to give us 10. 10 is going to be added to the numerator of the mixed number to create 13, which is now our numerator for our improper fraction. And we're going to keep the denominator from our mixed number, and it's going to be the same denominator for our improper fraction. As you can see from the example, it was much easier for students or for yourself to process the instructions that I want them to do while receiving an example rather than having written and verbal at the same time or holding it in their working memory and trying to figure out what I want them to do. I hope this information was beneficial for you, and if you have any questions, please comment below on the YouTube video, and have a great day. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me.